The night my sister showed up at my door with snow frozen into her hair, I realized something terrifying about betrayal. It does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives quietly, carrying a child too tired to cry. I had just finished a 14-hour overnight logistics shift outside Pittsburgh, and my entire body felt like it had been filled with wet cement. Freezing rain hammered against my windshield the whole drive home, and the highway lights blurred together through exhaustion until everything looked underwater. By the time I turned onto my street in Bellevue, Pennsylvania, all I wanted was a hot shower, silence, and maybe 4 hours of sleep before life started demanding things from me again. Then I saw a woman standing under the weak yellow porch light outside my duplex. At first, I honestly thought somebody's car had broken down nearby. She was holding the hand of a little boy bundled in a winter coat that was too thin for December, and beside them sat an old Navy suitcase with one wheel missing. Snow had gathered across the shoulders of her coat and melted into her hair. I killed the engine slowly, staring through the windshield for a second before my brain finally caught up with what my eyes were seeing. Emily? The second I stepped out of the truck, my sister looked at me with the kind of face people have after surviving a car crash. Not dramatic, not hysterical, just hollow. Noah stood beside her holding a stuffed dinosaur under one arm. One of his rain boots lit up every time he shifted his feet against the porch. The other boot had stopped blinking a long time ago. Daniel changed the locks, Emily said quietly. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. His mother helped him carry our things outside. I stood there in the freezing rain for maybe 3 full seconds without speaking. My brain refused to process it. Daniel Carter had spent 16 years building the image of a perfect suburban husband, church volunteer, soft-spoken contractor, the kind of man who smiled with both hands around a coffee cup while asking about your job, the kind of man neighbors trusted to feed their dogs during vacation, the kind of man who knew exactly how to perform goodness in public. Then Emily said 6 words that changed everything. He brought her into my kitchen. Something cold settled into my chest after that. I grabbed Noah's suitcase with one hand and opened the back door of my truck with the other. "Get in," I said. Emily hesitated. I could see humiliation all over her face. My older sister had spent most of her adult life trying to build a warm little American family inside a 2-story colonial house in Cranberry Township, and now she was standing in freezing rain holding a garbage bag full of clothes while her 5-year-old son shivered beside her. Noah climbed into the truck first because children still believe adults can fix things. Emily moved slower, like every step hurt. Inside my duplex, the heater rattled like it was fighting for its own survival. The place wasn't much. Old hardwood floors, narrow kitchen, pipes that screamed every time somebody upstairs used hot water. But it was warm, and nobody inside it was going to throw her out. The second Noah stepped into the living room, he burst into tears. Not loud crying, exhausted crying, the kind children do when they've been trying to stay brave too long. I crouched beside him and wrapped one of my old army blankets around his shoulders while Emily stood frozen near the kitchen counter, staring at nothing. "You hungry, buddy?" I asked softly. Noah nodded without looking at me. I opened a box of macaroni and cheese because it was the only thing in my pantry besides canned soup and protein bars. While the noodles boiled, I watched Emily carefully. Her mascara had dried in gray streaks under her eyes. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. That somehow made everything worse. "Tell me what happened," I said quietly. Emily laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "I picked Noah up from school early because he had a stomachache." She rubbed both hands over her face slowly. "When I got home, she was there." "The mistress?" Emily nodded. "Sitting at my kitchen island drinking wine from my glassware." My jaw tightened hard enough to hurt. "And Daniel?" Emily stared at the steam rising from the pot on my stove. "He told me we needed to talk like this was some kind of business meeting." Outside, freezing rain tapped against the windows in uneven bursts. Noah sat curled at the far end of my couch, hugging his dinosaur while cartoons played softly across my television screen. He looked too small for this world suddenly. "What did his mother do?" I asked. Emily closed her eyes for a second. Patricia handed him the new keys. That one nearly pushed me over the edge. Patricia Carter had built her entire identity around being a godly woman. Bible verses on Facebook, church bake sales, soft smiles. The type of woman who called everybody sweetheart while quietly judging them behind their backs. I had never trusted her, not once. She told me maybe this was God showing me I had failed as a wife. I actually turned away from Emily after she said that because I didn't trust my own face anymore. Some anger feels hot. Mine felt freezing. "Where's your money?" I asked carefully. Emily looked down immediately. "Gone." "What do you mean gone?" "Daniel emptied the joint checking account yesterday." "Your cards?" "Locked." I leaned both hands against the kitchen counter and stared at the floorboards. That was the moment I understood this was not impulsive cruelty. This was strategy. Daniel had planned everything. Money first, reputation second. Locks third. Men do not accidentally prepare a woman for homelessness. Noah climbed off the couch and walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy?" Emily immediately wiped her face and forced a smile that nearly broke my heart. "Yeah, baby." "Are we sleeping here tonight?" Emily opened her mouth, but no sound came out. So I answered for her. "As long as you need, buddy." Noah nodded like that, settled the matter completely. Then he climbed into Emily's lap, holding his dinosaur, and whispered something that made her finally start crying for real. "I don't like Daddy's new friend." The room went completely silent except for the sound of rain against glass. Emily pressed her face into Noah's hair while her shoulders shook hard enough. I thought she might fall apart right there in my kitchen. I stood at the stove gripping the wooden spoon so tightly my fingers hurt. After Noah finally fell asleep on my couch wrapped in 2 blankets, Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table holding a mug of untouched tea between both hands. Midnight had already passed. Snow mixed with rain outside beneath the streetlights. "There's something else," she whispered. I looked up slowly. "Daniel's company. What about it?" Emily hesitated. "Things haven't been right for a while." She explained in pieces. Cash payments. Fake overtime sheets. Missing safety certifications. Contractors being paid under different business names. At first it sounded like regular construction shortcuts. Then she mentioned the federal housing redevelopment project for disabled veterans outside Harrisburg. And suddenly, every instinct I'd developed during 12 years in military logistics started screaming at once. "Emily," I said carefully, "does Daniel know you've seen any paperwork?" "No." "Good." She frowned slightly. "Why?" I looked toward the dark living room where Noah slept curled against the couch cushions. Then I looked back at my sister sitting across from me wearing borrowed sweatpants because she no longer had access to half her own clothes. Because men who destroy their families this carefully usually have other things to hide. Emily stared at me for a long moment after that. "You think he's dangerous?" I thought about Daniel standing warm inside his expensive house while his son slept under army blankets in my duplex. I thought about Patricia handing over new keys while snow fell outside. I thought about emptied bank accounts and rehearsed lies and another woman drinking wine in Emily's kitchen. Then I answered honestly, "I think he's the kind of man who mistakes kindness for weakness." I leaned back slowly in my chair after saying it, exhaustion finally crashing into my bones all at once. Outside, snow continued falling across Pittsburgh, while my sister quietly cried into both hands under the dim yellow kitchen light. And somewhere less than 20 miles away, the man who had destroyed his own family probably still believed he was winning. The next morning did not feel like the beginning of revenge. It felt like cold coffee, unanswered phone calls, and the sound of my sister quietly breaking apart in my kitchen while pretending she was fine for her son. Pittsburgh woke up, gray and frozen outside my duplex windows. Dirty snow lined the sidewalks, and somewhere down the block a garbage truck groaned through the slush before sunrise. I had slept maybe 2 hours on the recliner with my boots still on. Noah was curled sideways across my couch beneath one of my old army blankets, clutching that stuffed dinosaur against his chest like it was the only stable thing left in his world. Emily sat at the kitchen table wearing one of my oversized hoodies, staring at her phone without blinking. Every few minutes she picked it up, read something, then locked the screen again like it had burned her fingers. "Stop checking his social media," I said while pouring burnt coffee into 2 mugs. She didn't look at me. I wasn't. "You were thinking about it." Emily finally glanced up, exhausted shadows sitting beneath her eyes. "I need my clothes, Harper. You need a lawyer first." The words came out harder than I intended, but exhaustion had sanded all the softness off me overnight. Emily flinched anyway. "You think I don't know that?" she whispered. I keep thinking maybe if we talk like adults." I almost laughed at that, but there was nothing funny left inside me. Men like Daniel loved private conversations. They loved closed doors and no witnesses, and making women cry quietly enough that nobody else heard it. Then afterward, they told everybody she was unstable, emotional, confused. I had seen men weaponize calmness before. Some of them wore uniforms while doing it. "You do not go back there alone," I said carefully. "Do you understand me?" Emily wrapped both hands around the coffee mug even though she wasn't drinking it. "It's still my house." Then let the court remind him of that. The room fell quiet after that except for the hum of my old refrigerator. Noah stirred on the couch and mumbled something in his sleep. Emily looked over at him immediately, and the expression on her face nearly broke me. Mothers always looked the most heartbroken when their children were finally resting. Like the silence gave pain more room to breathe. By 8:30 that morning, I had already called Noah's elementary school and informed them Daniel was not authorized to pick him up without Emily's written permission. I helped Emily freeze the remaining joint accounts Daniel had not emptied yet, though there wasn't much left to protect. A little under $900. 16 years of marriage reduced to less than a month's rent in western Pennsylvania. "I feel disgusting doing this," Emily whispered while photographing the garbage bags Patricia had dumped onto the lawn the night before. "Doing what?" "Documenting everything." I looked down at the ripped zipper on Noah's suitcase sitting beside the kitchen table. "This isn't what's disgusting," I said quietly. "We're just recording who made it that way." Around noon we drove downtown to a legal aid office near the Allegheny River. The waiting room smelled like old carpet and vending machine coffee. Noah sat beside Emily eating pretzels from a Ziploc bag while cartoons played silently on a mounted television nobody was actually watching. Emily kept smoothing Noah's hair back from his forehead every few minutes like she needed physical proof he was still there. The attorney who met with us was a woman named Diane Mercer. Early 60s, silver hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked tired in the way only deeply compassionate people eventually do. She listened without interrupting while Emily explained the affair, the lockout, the emptied bank account, and Patricia standing in the doorway while another woman walked around Emily's kitchen in socks. Diane did not react dramatically once. Somehow that made her feel trustworthy immediately. When Emily finished speaking, Diane folded both hands together across her desk and said something I wrote down later because it mattered that much. "Do not let shame make you cooperative with people who are harming you." Emily looked down at her lap instantly. Diane continued gently. "Men like your husband depend on your embarrassment. They count on decent women wanting to stay polite." Something inside Emily cracked quietly after hearing that. I could see it in her face. Like somebody had finally translated her pain into plain English. Diane gave us a list of what to save. Screenshots, bank statements, witness names, text messages, evidence of financial withdrawal patterns, anything involving Noah. "Especially anything involving Noah," she repeated firmly. On the drive home, Emily stayed silent almost the entire time. Snow drifted softly against the windshield, while Noah hummed to himself in the back seat, drawing shapes into the fogged-up window glass. Finally, Emily asked, "Do you think everybody's going to believe him?" I tightened my hands on the steering wheel. "Some people will." She nodded slowly like she already knew that answer. "That's the part I can't stop thinking about." "Which part?" Emily stared out at the passing traffic. "He's good at being liked." I understood exactly what she meant because Daniel Carter had spent years constructing himself carefully. He knew how to smile at neighbors while carrying groceries. He knew how to pray over meals in restaurants loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. He knew how to shake hands with veterans and compliment old women and post anniversary tributes online with photographs cropped just perfectly enough to look sincere. Men like Daniel treated public image like another mortgage payment, something to maintain at all costs. By the third day, his performance had already started. His first Facebook post appeared around dinner time. Sometimes protecting your peace requires painful decisions. Emily stared at the screen while sitting at my kitchen table, her face slowly draining of color. Patricia commented underneath within minutes. "Praying truth always finds the light," followed by a Bible verse about wisdom and obedience. I actually felt my stomach turn. Emily looked at me helplessly. "They're making me sound crazy." "Because that's easier than admitting cruelty," I answered. Then came the messages. Women from church asking if she was doing okay. Neighbors checking in with careful fake concern. One man Daniel worked with sent a text saying, "Hope you find healing and accountability." Accountability. That word nearly made me throw Emily's phone across the room. Meanwhile, Noah started asking questions children should never have to ask. Why didn't Daddy want us there anymore? Is Vanessa my new mom now? Did I do something bad? Every single question landed like a punch to the chest. One night after Noah finally fell asleep, I found Emily sitting alone in my laundry room crying into a basket of folded towels because she did not want Noah hearing her. "I ruined his life," she whispered through tears. "No, Harper, he lost his home because of me. I crouched down beside her slowly. Noah lost his home because his father cared more about winning than protecting him. Emily covered her face with both hands. I should have seen this coming. You did see parts of it. Then why did I stay? The truth sat heavy in my throat for a second before I finally answered. Because love makes decent people explain away things that should scare them. Emily cried harder after that, but not because I hurt her. Because she knew it was true. A week passed like that. Survival mode. I drove Noah to school before my shifts. Emily applied for jobs online between panic attacks. My truck started making a grinding noise every time I shifted into reverse because apparently the universe believed character development required financial suffering too. Then, one Thursday night, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch watching cartoons, Emily walked into the kitchen holding her phone with shaking hands. Harper, she whispered, look at this. Daniel had posted photographs from a charity dinner downtown. Expensive suit, arm around Vanessa's waist, smiling like a man untouched by consequences. But that wasn't what froze Emily completely. Vanessa was wearing Emily's gray cashmere coat, the one Daniel bought her on their 10th anniversary in Vermont. I looked at the photo for maybe 3 full seconds before anger started rising so hard inside me, I thought I might physically choke on it. Emily sat down heavily at the kitchen table. That's my coat, she whispered. I know. She's wearing my life. The room went silent after that. Snow tapped softly against the windows while the heater rattled through the walls of my duplex. Emily stared at the picture like she no longer recognized the world she lived in. Then quietly, almost too quietly to hear, she asked the question that changed everything. Harper, what if Daniel's hiding more than just the affair? I looked up slowly. Emily swallowed hard. A few months ago, I found invoices in his office that didn't make sense. Same project, different company names. Cash withdrawals that disappeared. He got angry when I asked about it. My pulse slowed instantly, not because I was calming down, because military logistics had taught me something important years earlier. The moment somebody starts moving money strangely, the truth is always uglier than the first lie. Emily, I said carefully, do you still have access to any emails or documents? She hesitated. Maybe. Good. Outside. Freezing rain started falling again across Pittsburgh, while somewhere less than 20 miles away, Daniel Carter probably still believed he was controlling the narrative. But for the first time since Emily arrived at my door carrying a broken suitcase and a terrified child, I started realizing something dangerous. Men like Daniel almost never destroy just one thing. Eventually, the lies spread everywhere. And when they finally collapse, they bury entire lives underneath them. By February, the snow around Pittsburgh had turned gray and ugly, the way winter always does when it overstays its welcome. Nothing looked clean anymore. Not the streets, not the sky, not our lives. The worst part about betrayal is that after the initial explosion, real life keeps going anyway. Kids still need breakfast, bills still arrive in the mail. You still have to stand in grocery store checkout lines pretending your entire world didn't collapse 3 weeks earlier. Emily had stopped crying constantly by then, which honestly worried me more than the crying had. Sadness at least moves. Numbness just sits there quietly rotting. Most mornings I found her awake before sunrise, sitting at my kitchen table with Noah's school laptop open in front of her, while cold coffee went untouched beside her hand. Sometimes she stared at apartment listings she couldn't afford. Sometimes job applications. Sometimes nothing at all. Noah started sleeping better, but only if Emily stayed beside him until he fell asleep. Every night he asked the same question in different, Daddy's still mad at us? Daddy's coming back eventually? Daddy still loves me, right? Children do not understand adult betrayal. They only understand absence. One Thursday evening after work, I walked into my duplex and found Noah sitting cross-legged on the living room floor drawing pictures with crayons, while Emily silently folded laundry beside him. The apartment smelled faintly like tomato soup and dryer sheets. For 1 second, it almost looked peaceful. Then Noah held up a drawing proudly. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright yellow sun. Him, Emily, me. Daniel was nowhere on the page. Emily saw it too. Her folding stopped immediately. Noah looked between us innocently. I made our family. Emily smiled at him because mothers will bleed internally before they let their children feel guilty for healing. It's beautiful, baby. Noah grinned and went back to coloring while Emily quietly looked away toward the kitchen so he wouldn't see tears filling her eyes. That night after Noah went to bed, Emily finally admitted something that made my stomach tighten. "I keep checking his page," she whispered from the couch. "Daniel's?" She nodded. "I know I shouldn't." I sat down across from her slowly. "Why?" Emily stared at the television without really seeing it. "Because every time I look, I keep hoping I'll find proof this hurts him too." God, that one landed hard, because I understood exactly what she meant. People think heartbreak is wanting somebody back. Sometimes heartbreak is just wanting proof you mattered at all. Emily swallowed hard. "But he looks happy." Daniel's social media had turned into a performance theater. Pictures at upscale restaurants, smiling selfies beside Vanessa, motivational quotes about protecting peace. One post showed them at a wine bar downtown while snow fell outside the windows behind them. Vanessa wore Emily's scarf in the picture. I recognized it immediately. Emily did too. "I hate myself for noticing things like that," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "You hate that somebody replaced your life while you were still grieving it." Emily looked down at her hands. 16 years, Harper." Her voice cracked softly. "How does somebody throw away 16 years like it's nothing?" I wanted to answer her. I wanted to tell her there was a logical explanation for cruelty. But there wasn't. Some people destroy things simply because they believe they'll never have to carry the consequences. A few days later, everything shifted. I was sitting at my desk during lunch break inside the logistics office near Moon Township when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it until I read the message. "We need to talk about Daniel." It was signed Vanessa. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before responding. "Wrong person." Her reply came immediately. "He's lying to both of us." That got my attention. Outside the office windows, freezing rain streaked sideways across the parking lot, while forklifts moved shipping containers through slush. My entire body went still. Another message appeared before I could decide whether to answer. I think he used my name for something illegal. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Suddenly, every strange detail Emily mentioned over the past few weeks started lining up inside my head differently. Duplicate invoices, missing money, federal project funding. Panic crawled quietly up my spine. I replied before I could overthink it. "Where?" We met the next afternoon inside a small coffee shop near the Pittsburgh Amtrak station. The kind of place filled with old brick walls, local artwork, and exhausted people pretending caffeine could save them from adulthood. Vanessa was already sitting in the corner when I arrived. She looked younger in person. Not glamorous, not seductive, just nervous. Her blonde hair was shoved into a messy bun, and she kept rubbing her palms against the sleeves of her sweatshirt like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. The second I sat down, she looked at me carefully and said, "You probably hate me." I took off my gloves slowly. "Honestly, I don't think about you enough to hate you. Not my kindest moment, but not my worst either." Vanessa winced anyway. "I deserve that." "Probably." She looked down at her untouched coffee. "Daniel told me they were basically separated." I almost laughed. "Every cheating man in America says that." Vanessa's eyes filled immediately. "I know that now." For a second, she looked heartbreakingly young. Not innocent, but definitely foolish. And suddenly I saw something clearly for the first time. Daniel had not chosen Vanessa because she was special. He chose her because she was easier to manipulate than a woman his own age. "Tell me about the paperwork," I said. Vanessa unlocked her phone and slid it across the table. Screenshots filled the screen. Invoices, transfers, email confirmations. At first glance, it looked like regular contractor confusion. Then I noticed the company names. Multiple shell vendors tied to the same addresses. Payments routed through different subcontractors attached to the Veterans Redevelopment Project outside Harrisburg. My pulse slowed immediately. That was never a good sign. "Why is your name attached to these?" I asked. Vanessa swallowed hard. "Daniel said it was temporary for tax purposes." I stared at her. "Tax purposes." She nodded weakly. "I didn't sign anything though. I swear." "Good." Vanessa looked close to tears now. "Am I in trouble?" I looked at her honestly. "I don't know yet." And that terrified me because I meant it. Vanessa kept talking after that like somebody finally releasing air from a burst lung. Daniel told her Emily was emotionally unstable, claimed the marriage had been dead for years, said he stayed because he pitied Noah, said I was controlling and obsessed with protecting Emily. Apparently, Daniel described himself as the victim in every version of reality he created. Then Vanessa showed me the message that changed everything. It came from Patricia. "Move the money through the church outreach account first." Nobody checks donation accounts carefully. I read it twice. Slowly. Cold anger settled into my stomach like concrete. Patricia was not just protecting her son. She was participating, covering tracks, helping him move money through church funds tied to charity events. Jesus Christ. Vanessa looked terrified now. I didn't know about any of this. I believed her, not because she deserved trust automatically, but because frightened people tell the truth differently than liars do. Liars perform. Fear just leaks out. When I finally left the coffee shop nearly 2 hours later, freezing rain had turned into heavy wet snow. I drove home gripping the steering wheel too tightly the entire way. Emily was sitting at my kitchen table helping Noah glue cotton balls onto a school art project when I walked inside. The second she looked up, she knew something had happened. "What?" she asked immediately. I set my keys down carefully. I met Vanessa. The room went completely silent. Noah looked up from his art project. Emily's face drained white. "You what?" She contacted me. "And you went?" She had information. Emily stood up so fast her chair scraped hard against the floor. "You sat down with the woman sleeping with my husband? Your husband may be committing federal fraud. And she slept with him." Noah stared between us, wide-eyed now. Emily lowered her voice immediately when she noticed him watching. "Can you go finish your project in the bedroom for mommy, baby?" Noah nodded slowly and carried his glue sticks down the hallway. The second his bedroom door closed, Emily turned back toward me with tears already forming. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" "Emily." "No, tell me. Tell me what part of this is supposed to make me feel protected." I rubbed my forehead hard. "Daniel's moving money through fake vendors connected to federal contracts." "I don't care," she snapped, then immediately covered her mouth because she sounded shocked by her own anger. The room fell silent again. Finally, Emily whispered the real truth underneath all of it. "She probably knows more about my husband than I do now." God. That hurt because it was true. Emily looked shattered suddenly. Not angry anymore, just exhausted. "I gave him 16 years, she whispered. "I built every part of that life with him." I stepped closer carefully. "And none of this is your fault." Emily laughed bitterly through tears. "That doesn't stop it from hurting." Then she walked quietly into the bathroom and locked the door behind her. A few seconds later, I heard her crying softly into a towel so Noah wouldn't hear. I stood alone in the kitchen listening to the sound of my sister trying not to break apart while snow hammered against the windows outside. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I realized something terrifying. Daniel Carter had not just destroyed his marriage, he had built his entire life the exact same way. Lies first. Image second. Consequences later. And eventually men like that always run out of places to hide. By March, the custody hearings had started, and I finally understood why so many women gave up before the truth ever reached daylight. It was not because they were weak, it was because the system exhausted them slowly, until survival itself started feeling like a full-time job. Family court in Allegheny County did not look dramatic the way television wanted people to believe. There were no emotional speeches echoing across courtrooms, no lawyers shouting objections. Mostly it was fluorescent lighting, burnt coffee, tired parents carrying folders full of paperwork, and children caught in the middle of wars they never started. The first hearing happened on a freezing Thursday morning while sleet tapped against the courthouse windows downtown. Emily barely touched her coffee during the drive there. She sat in the passenger seat, twisting the sleeve of her coat around her fingers, while Noah slept in the back seat beneath a dinosaur blanket because school had been canceled for weather. "I feel sick," she whispered as we pulled into the parking garage. I glanced over at her carefully. "That's normal." "No, I mean actually sick." She pressed her hand against her stomach. "What if they believe him?" I parked the truck slowly before answering because I needed my voice calm. "Then we keep fighting anyway." Emily laughed weakly at that. "You make everything sound simple." "It isn't simple," I said quietly. "It's just necessary." Inside the courthouse lobby, people moved through metal detectors carrying custody paperwork and diaper bags like grief had become part of everyday American routine. Noah stood beside me clutching my hand while Emily checked in with Diane Mercer near the elevators. Then Daniel arrived. I saw him before Emily did. Navy wool coat, expensive leather gloves, calm expression. The same practiced confidence he wore in every Facebook picture since throwing his wife and child into the snow. Patricia walked beside him carrying a Bible against her chest like a stage prop. And behind them came Vanessa wearing oversized sunglasses, despite the fact the sky looked like wet concrete outside. Emily stiffened the second she saw them. Her breathing changed immediately. "Hey," I said softly, stepping closer to her. "Stay with me." Daniel spotted us then. For half a second, something uncomfortable flashed across his face. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. Then the performance returned. He walked toward us carefully, wearing that same gentle smile I had spent weeks learning to hate. "Emily?" he said softly, like they were two adults navigating an unfortunate misunderstanding instead of a man who emptied her bank account and changed the locks on her house. Emily said nothing. Daniel looked down at Noah. "Hey, buddy." Noah hid partly behind my leg immediately. Daniel's expression tightened almost invisibly. "Noah, don't do that." That sentence right there told me everything. Not "I miss you." Not "How are you?" Just irritation that his son's fear made him look bad publicly. Emily finally found her voice. "You shouldn't talk to him without permission right now." Daniel exhaled slowly, like he was the reasonable one being forced to tolerate emotional women. "Emily, this is exactly the kind of hostility I've been trying to avoid." I physically felt my jaw tighten. Patricia stepped forward then with that fake church voice dripping honey over poison. "We all just want what's best for Noah." I looked directly at her. "You helped throw your grandson into the snow." Her smile disappeared instantly. "Good." For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Daniel quietly said something that made my blood run cold. "You've always had anger issues, Harper." There it was. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just careful manipulation planted like a seed in public. The kind of statement designed to make people watch me differently afterward. I understood the tactic immediately because I had seen men weaponize composure before, especially against women in uniform. One emotional reaction from me, and suddenly his narrative became believable. Aggressive sister, controlling influence, emotionally unstable environment. So I smiled slightly instead. "And you've always confused politeness with character." Daniel's eyes hardened for the first time all morning. Before he could answer, Diane appeared beside us carrying 3 folders under one arm. "Courtroom B," she said calmly. "Let's move." The hearing itself felt less like justice and more like being dissected under fluorescent lights. Daniel's attorney was a tall, silver-haired man named Richard Halpern who spoke in the calm, measured tone of somebody charging $400 an hour to sound reasonable. He referred to Emily as emotionally overwhelmed, 6 separate times in 40 minutes. He described Daniel as a stable financial provider seeking consistency for his son. Consistency. The word nearly made me laugh out loud. This from the man who introduced his child to his mistress before the divorce papers were even finalized. Emily sat beside Diane, twisting tissues apart in her lap, while strangers summarized 16 years of her life in bullet points. "Mrs. Carter has demonstrated difficulty maintaining emotional regulation since the separation," Halpern said smoothly. I looked toward Emily immediately. Her eyes dropped to the table. God, I hated that. Watching good women shrink themselves, while men rewrote reality in expensive courtrooms. Then came the part that nearly pushed me over the edge. Mr. Carter also expresses concern regarding the influence of Sergeant Harper Collins, Halpern continued. "We have reason to believe Miss Collins has encouraged hostility and emotional alienation between the child and his father." I actually leaned back in my chair because for one dangerous second I thought I might stand up and say something career-ending. Diane touched my sleeve lightly without looking at me. "Stay calm." That touch said everything. Family court does not reward rage. Especially not from women. Especially not from women trained to protect people. Emily finally spoke near the end of the hearing, and her voice shook so badly it physically hurt me to listen. "I never wanted Noah to lose his father," she whispered. "I just wanted my son to feel safe." Daniel looked down immediately after she said that. Not guilty, calculating. Like he was deciding whether empathy would benefit him publicly. The judge approved temporary shared visitation pending further evaluation. Emily looked like somebody had punched the air out of her lungs. Noah would spend weekends with Daniel starting the following month. Outside the courtroom, Emily completely fell apart for the first time in weeks. "This is insane," she whispered once we reached the hallway. "He lies and everybody acts like both sides are equal." Diane sighed softly beside her. "Family court moves carefully because children are involved." Emily laughed bitterly through tears. "Children are already involved." That line stayed with me afterward because she was right. Systems built to avoid mistakes often end up forcing victims to survive prolonged damage instead. While Emily cried quietly near the elevator, somebody behind me said my name. "Sergeant Collins?" I turned around slowly. Richard Halpern stood several feet away with one hand tucked into his coat pocket. Up close, he looked older, tired around the eyes. "Can I help you?" I asked flatly. He glanced briefly toward Emily before lowering his voice. "Off the record?" I crossed my arms. "That depends." Halpern studied me carefully for a second. "Your brother-in-law has larger legal problems developing than this custody case." My pulse slowed instantly. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said quietly. "If I were you, I'd encourage your sister to protect herself financially as quickly as possible." Something cold moved through my stomach. "You know about the contracts." He did not answer directly. That answer told me enough. Daniel believes confidence can outlive evidence. Halpern continued softly. "Men like that are usually wrong eventually." Then he walked away before I could ask another question. The conversation rattled around in my head for the rest of the week. Meanwhile, Emily started unraveling again, not loudly, quietly. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating full meals. One night I found her standing in my kitchen at 2 a.m, staring out the window while snow drifted past the streetlights outside. "What are you doing awake?" I asked softly. Emily didn't turn around. "I keep thinking maybe if I had been prettier." Jesus Christ, don't. Or less tired all the time. Or more exciting. Emily. She finally looked at me then, tears already filling her eyes. "He replaced me in less than a month, Harper." I walked closer slowly. "No. He replaced responsibility with convenience." Emily covered her mouth with one hand, but the tears came anyway. "I used to think our marriage meant something sacred to him." Her voice cracked hard. "I thought loving somebody for 16 years protected you." I stood beside her quietly for a second before answering. "Sometimes it just teaches the wrong person how much damage they're capable of causing." Emily cried silently after that while snow covered Pittsburgh outside in another layer of freezing white. And somewhere across the city, Daniel Carter was probably still rehearsing innocence in front of mirrors while his entire life slowly started cracking underneath him. He just did not know it yet. The night everything finally collapsed started with a black dress Emily almost refused to wear. By April, Pittsburgh had begun thawing out after one of the ugliest winters I could remember. Dirty snow disappeared from parking lots. Restaurant patios reopened downtown. Trees along the river started showing the first signs of green again, like the city itself was trying to remember how to breathe. But inside my duplex, it still felt like survival most days. Emily stood in my bedroom doorway holding the dress against herself with tired eyes. "I can't do this," she whispered. "It's just a fundraiser." "No," she said quietly. "It's his fundraiser." She wasn't wrong. The Veterans Housing Renewal Gala downtown had Daniel Carter's fingerprints all over it. His construction company was one of the event sponsors, which made me physically sick considering federal investigators were already circling his contracts quietly behind the scenes. Diane had encouraged Emily to attend through a support network for military families. "You need to exist somewhere outside this divorce," she told her. But Daniel had become one of those people who poisoned every room before he even entered it. Emily stared at herself in my bedroom mirror for a long moment. The black dress fit looser than it used to. Stress had carved weight off her over the last few months in all the wrong places. "I look tired," she said softly. I adjusted the collar on my dark gray coat while watching her carefully. "You look like somebody who survived something." Emily laughed weakly at that. "That's not exactly glamorous. Neither is the truth." For a second, she almost smiled. Down the hallway, Noah was asleep at Diane's niece's apartment for the night after begging to stay because they had a golden retriever named Murphy, who let him use its stomach as a pillow. Thank God. That child had already watched enough adults destroy each other. Downtown Pittsburgh glittered with rainwater when we arrived at the hotel ballroom just after 7. The city looked beautiful in the way only older American cities do at night. Bridges glowing gold over black rivers, wet pavement reflecting traffic lights, expensive restaurants full of people pretending life had structure. Inside the ballroom, everything smelled faintly like coffee, wine, and polished wood. Veterans in dress uniforms mingled beside wealthy donors carrying champagne glasses. American flags stood near the stage beneath soft lighting, while a jazz trio played quietly in the corner. For the first hour, things stayed manageable. Emily even laughed once while talking to an older Marine couple from Ohio who told stories about terrible military housing during the 80s. I watched her carefully the entire time because healing is fragile at first. It can disappear over one bad sentence. Then Daniel walked in. You could actually feel the shift in the room. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit with an American flag pin attached near the lapel. looking every inch the respectable businessman he had spent years pretending to be. Patricia floated beside him in pearl earrings and cream silk like God personally appointed her guardian of morality. And several feet behind them came Vanessa wearing a dark blue dress and the expression of somebody regretting every decision that brought her there. Emily went completely still beside me. "Breathe," I murmured quietly. "I hate that he still affects me like this," she whispered. Honestly, I understood. Trauma doesn't disappear just because somebody finally deserves consequences. Daniel spotted us near the coffee station almost immediately. Surprise flashed across his face for half a second before his public smile slid back into place. Then he started walking toward us. "Emily," he said warmly when he reached us, as though this were a pleasant accidental reunion instead of a battlefield disguised as a fundraiser. Emily didn't answer. Daniel glanced toward me. "Harper," I nodded once. Patricia stepped forward with that same church-soft voice I had grown to despise. "Tonight should remain peaceful for everyone's sake." I looked directly at her. "You helped throw your grandson into the snow." Her expression tightened instantly. "Good." Before anybody could respond, Vanessa approached slowly, holding a glass of water with both hands. Daniel's jaw flexed the second he saw her near us. "Vanessa?" he warned quietly. "Relax," she muttered. "I'm not here for you." Something about her tone made me look closer. She seemed nervous. Not guilty, nervous. Terrified nervous. Then I noticed the two men entering through the side doors near registration. Dark suits, federal posture, calm expressions. One older, one younger. And walking beside them was a woman carrying a compliance binder against her chest. Daniel saw them too. For the first time since this nightmare started, I watched genuine fear cross his face. Not irritation, not annoyance. Fear. The older investigator approached politely. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel immediately straightened. "Yes? We need a few minutes of your time regarding several financial discrepancies connected to the Harrisburg redevelopment contracts." Conversations nearby started slowing down. Not dramatically. Just enough. Human beings always sense collapse before they fully understand it. Daniel forced a laugh that sounded painfully artificial. "Now? It won't take long." Patricia stepped forward immediately. "There must be some misunderstanding." Nobody answered her. Daniel glanced around the ballroom quickly like a man calculating exits. Then his eyes landed directly on me, and that was the moment he destroyed himself. "You did this?" he snapped loudly. Several nearby conversations stopped completely. I stayed calm. "Did what?" "This whole thing." His voice kept rising. "You couldn't stand seeing your sister move on, so you poisoned everything." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "Move on?" she whispered. But Daniel was unraveling now. "You've been obsessed with controlling her since the beginning," he continued, pointing toward me. "You always thought you were better than everybody because you wear a uniform." Several veterans near the stage turned toward him immediately at that. Not supportively. Offended. The younger investigator stepped closer. "Sir, we should continue this conversation privately." But Daniel ignored him completely. That's the thing about arrogant men. Once panic cracks their performance, they stop recognizing danger. Patricia grabbed his sleeve tightly. "Lower your voice." Then she made her mistake too. "You said nobody would check the outreach accounts that closely." Silence swallowed the room. Real silence. The kind where silverware stops moving. One donor near the stage slowly lowered his wine glass. The older investigator looked directly at Patricia. "Excuse me?" Her face drained white instantly. Daniel turned toward her with absolute horror. And then Vanessa broke. "He used my name on fake invoices," she blurted out suddenly. Her voice shook hard enough to echo. "He told me it was temporary." Daniel rounded on her immediately. "You stupid little—" "Daniel." Emily's voice cut through the ballroom sharp as glass. Everyone looked at her. Even Daniel stopped talking. Emily stood slowly from her chair. She looked small, standing there beneath the ballroom lights in her simple black dress. But for the first time in months, she did not look broken. "You know what the saddest part is?" she asked quietly. Daniel stared at her without speaking. Emily swallowed once before continuing. "I spent 16 years believing if I loved you hard enough, eventually you would love us the same way back." The entire ballroom remained silent. You could hear rain hitting the hotel windows somewhere behind the stage. Daniel opened his mouth, probably searching desperately for another performance. Another excuse. Another carefully rehearsed version of himself. Then panic won. "I only fought for custody because I knew it would hurt you," he snapped. The words hit the room like shattered glass. Even Patricia looked stunned. Vanessa physically stepped backward. One of the veterans near the stage muttered, "Jesus Christ." Daniel realized what he had admitted exactly 1 second too late. Emily's face changed after that. Not triumph, not rage, just clarity, like somebody waking up from a very long nightmare. She picked up her coat calmly. I stood beside her immediately. Neither of us looked back while investigators started speaking to Daniel near the ballroom entrance. Outside the hotel, cold rain swept across downtown Pittsburgh beneath glowing bridge lights. Traffic hissed through wet streets while thunder rolled somewhere over the river. Emily stopped beneath the awning and let out one long shaking breath. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, almost like she was confessing something to herself instead of me, she whispered, "I kept waiting for him to finally tell the truth." I looked back once through the hotel glass doors. Daniel stood surrounded by investigators and donors who no longer looked impressed by him. His entire carefully built image was collapsing in real time. Then I looked at my sister standing beside me in the rain. "No," I said softly. "You were waiting for everybody else to stop pretending they couldn't see it." Emily stared at me for a long moment after that. Then finally, for the first time since she showed up freezing outside my duplex carrying a broken suitcase and a terrified child, she nodded without crying. And somehow that felt bigger than revenge. 8 months after Emily arrived at my door carrying a broken suitcase and a little boy who could not understand why his father stopped choosing him, life finally stopped feeling like pure survival. Not perfect, not magical, just quieter. And honestly, after everything we had lived through, quiet started feeling like luxury. Summer settled gently over Pittsburgh that year. The heavy gray skies of winter disappeared, replaced by warm evenings filled with crickets and the smell of cut grass drifting through apartment windows. Emily finally found a small 2-bedroom apartment above an old bookstore in Bellevue. The floors creaked. The kitchen drawers stuck whenever humidity rolled in from the river. The air conditioner sounded like it was fighting for its life every night. But the apartment belonged to her. Nobody could lock her out of it. Nobody could throw her child into the cold anymore. The first night after moving in, Emily sent me a picture around midnight. Noah was asleep beneath glow-in-the-dark stars taped crooked across his bedroom ceiling. His stuffed dinosaur rested beneath one arm while one sock had slipped halfway off his foot during sleep. The caption beneath the photo was only one word: home. I stared at that message longer than I want to admit, because people who have never rebuilt their lives after betrayal do not understand how sacred ordinary peace becomes afterward. Meanwhile, Daniel's world kept shrinking quietly in the background. Not dramatically, not all at once. Consequences rarely arrive like explosions. Usually they arrive slowly, like water damage behind walls. At first, nobody notices. Then one day the whole structure smells rotten. His company officially lost the federal redevelopment contracts by June. A formal investigation into financial misconduct continued behind closed doors, while several subcontractors publicly cut ties with him. Church friends who once treated Daniel like a community success story suddenly became difficult to reach. Parents from Noah's old school stopped making eye contact during pickup. Patricia disappeared almost completely from social media after questions about charity accounting began spreading through church circles. Nobody needed a public humiliation anymore. The truth had already done the work on its own. I heard through Diane that Daniel still blamed everybody else. Me, Emily, Vanessa. Government oversight. Stress. Apparently, accountability was still something that only happened to other people in his mind. Vanessa vanished from our lives shortly after the gala. Last I heard, she moved to Columbus and started over working at another dealership. I never forgave her exactly, but eventually I stopped wasting energy hating her too. Some people are cruel by nature. Some are simply weak enough to follow cruel people until it destroys them too. There's a difference. Emily healed slowly. Real healing always happens slowly. That was something nobody tells women enough. In your 20s, people expect dramatic comebacks, makeovers, new relationships, reinvention. But healing in your 40s looks different. Sometimes it just means sleeping through the night again. Sometimes it means hearing your phone vibrate without your stomach dropping. Sometimes it means laughing at a stupid commercial and realizing you have not genuinely laughed in months. One Saturday morning in late July, I stopped by Emily's apartment carrying coffee and breakfast sandwiches before drill weekend. Noah opened the door wearing superhero pajamas and immediately crashed into my legs, yelling my name like I had been gone for years instead of 3 days. Emily stood behind him, smiling softly while sunlight poured through the apartment windows. Real smiling this time. Not survival smiling. Not pretending. Real. I looked around the apartment quietly. Secondhand furniture. Crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. Noah's backpack tossed carelessly beside the couch. A tiny herb garden growing near the kitchen window because Emily said basil made the place smell hopeful. Peace. That was all it was. Just peace. But after the kind of year we survived, peace looked expensive. "You finally fixed the truck?" Emily asked while handing me coffee. "Mostly." She frowned slightly. "You never told me how much the transmission repair cost." "Because I enjoy avoiding cardiac events." Emily shook her head slowly. "Harper, you carried us for months." "That's what family does." But later that night, driving home along Route 65 with old rock music playing softly through the speakers, I admitted something to myself I had been avoiding for a long time. This whole thing changed me too. Not just Emily. Me. Somewhere during those months I became sharper, harder, less patient with people. There were nights when revenge mattered to me more than sleep, more than peace, maybe even more than happiness. That realization scared me a little because bitterness never arrives announcing itself honestly. It arrives sounding reasonable. They deserve pain. They deserve humiliation. They deserve to lose everything they took from you. And maybe sometimes they do. But if you live inside that anger too long, eventually it starts rebuilding you into somebody unrecognizable. One evening near the end of summer, Emily and I sat outside her apartment building while Noah chased fireflies across the grass with 2 neighborhood kids. The air smelled like barbecue smoke from somebody grilling nearby. Cicadas buzzed lazily in the trees while traffic hummed faintly somewhere beyond the river. Emily leaned back in her lawn chair quietly. "Do you think people like Daniel ever really pay for what they did?" she asked. I thought about that for a long moment before answering. I thought about Daniel sitting alone inside some expensive apartment, still blaming the world for consequences he built himself. I thought about Patricia losing the admiration she treated like oxygen. I thought about Noah asking me if his father forgot him. Then I answered honestly. "Not always the way we want." Emily looked over at me carefully. I took a slow sip of iced tea before continuing. "Some people never apologize. Some never fully understand the damage they caused. But eventually they lose access to good people. And honestly, that ends up costing them more than they expected." Emily nodded slowly after that. "I used to think leaving meant failing," she admitted quietly. Noah's laughter drifted across the courtyard while lightning bugs blinked around him in soft gold flashes. "No," I said gently. "Sometimes leaving is the first time you finally choose yourself." We sat there silently for a while after that, and for the first time in nearly a year, silence no longer felt heavy. Later that night, Noah fell asleep halfway through a movie, curled beside Emily on the couch. One hand still wrapped around his stuffed dinosaur. Emily covered him carefully with a blanket before turning toward me. Tears filled her eyes suddenly, but they were different tears now. Not broken tears, safe tears. "Thank you," she whispered. I shook my head immediately. "No more thanking people for loving you." That finally made her cry for real, but softly, the way people cry when they realize they survived something they thought would destroy them forever. Before I left, I paused near the apartment door and looked back one last time. Emily sat beside her sleeping son beneath warm yellow lamplight, while summer rain tapped gently against the windows outside. Peace. Just peace. And maybe that was the entire point all along. If you're watching this story right now, and your heart feels tired from betrayal, abandonment, divorce, manipulation, or loving somebody who slowly convinced you that your pain was an inconvenience, please remember this. Kindness and self-respect can exist together. Loving somebody deeply does not mean you must allow them to destroy your peace. Sometimes walking away is not weakness at all. Sometimes it is the bravest thing a person will ever do. And sometimes the moment you stop begging for love is the exact moment your real life finally begins. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. What do you think hurts more, being betrayed by someone you loved, or realizing they never loved you the same way back? And if you've ever had to rebuild your life after heartbreak, what was the one thing that finally helped you heal? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who might need the reminder that surviving betrayal is possible, and peace is still waiting on the other side of it.